Welcome to 30 Minute Theology. I am Olu Osharko, your leader for this session, where we dig into the Word of God looking for practical principles to apply to our everyday life. Today is the last installment of our series, Chain Reaction. And we started in Judges chapter 19, and we're ending with verse 21. I'm not verse, but chapter 21. And this is also the last book of Judges. So we will endeavor in a study of a new book when we return. But let's get started with this. The Israelites had vowed at Mizpah, "We will never give our daughters in marriage to a man from the tribe of Benjamin." Now the people went to Bethel and sat in the presence of God until evening, weeping loudly and bitterly. "O Lord, God of Israel," they cried out, "why has this happened in Israel? Now one of our tribes is missing from Israel." So much here. Proverbs chapter 3, verse 6 tells us that we are to acknowledge the Lord in all of our ways. We are to seek him. And if we acknowledge him, then he will direct our path. Now, in this situation, the Israelites made a vow that they will never give their daughters to marry men of the tribe of Benjamin, and understandably so, because of all the craziness that happened. I wouldn't want to give my daughter to any of those men either. However, who told them to vow this vow? Now we know that they vowed to fight, but we didn't know about this specific vow until now. They're painful, they're weeping, they're wailing, they have remorse. Sometimes when doing the right things, it's painful, it's difficult, it brings about sorrow, but there may also be some sorrow for the things that they did, because though they sought God, they did not seek him fully. They, got a little bit of information, but instead of getting the clarity that they needed, they just went on about their own way. Now, the why question on the surface seems self-explanatory. Here in verse 3, where it says, why has this happened in Israel? Well, because that tribe did some horrific things. That's why they were wiped out. But the better question is, how did we get to this point where they were wiped out? Now, some of it is due to the righteous indignation of the people of Israel. It reminds me of Phineas, Aaron's grandson, who went in and thrust a spear through a couple who were engaged in knowing each other biblically, to say it as politically correct as possible. And so as to not get flagged by YouTube, but he did that because the the Israelite person, was sleeping with someone who was not an Israelite. This was forbidden. And he was just like, I don't care. He was one of the women of Moab. It's like, I don't care that I got her. And, we're getting ready to do what we do. Come on. And, pretty much, even though it was in the tent, it was in it was in clear view, or I should say, it was well known by those around what was going on. Just like this situation, it was well known what happened in Gibeah. It was well known what the men of Gibeah did. And there was an opportunity given to Benjamin to correct it. But instead of correcting things, they stood with their atrocious brethren. Judges 17:6 also speaks to this, and this was one of the key verses for this study. And it says, in those days, Israel had no king. All the people did whatever seemed right in their own eyes. The wicked men of Gibeah decided that they were going to have their way with this stranger. When the stranger threw his concubine out, they took her instead and had their way with her, abusing her so bad in doing so that she died. Benjamin did not give up the men of Gibeah. They all fought, and this is again why we are where we are. And a good part of the reason why this series is named Chain Reaction, it was because of one thing that led to so many other things happening. Let's continue. Early the next morning, the people built an altar and presented their burnt offerings and peace offerings on it. Then they said, "Who among the tribes of Israel did not join us at Mizpah when we held our assembly in the presence of the Lord?" At that time, they had taken a solemn oath in the Lord's presence, vowing that anyone who refused to come will be put to death. Again, they're making another vow, a solemn vow. And when you make a vow unto God, you need to keep it. The Israelites felt sorry for their brother Benjamin and said, "Today, one of the tribes of Israel has been cut off. How can we find wives for the few who remain, since we have sworn by the Lord not to give them our daughters in marriage?" So they start off, they're doing godly things. They build an altar, they offer sacrifices on it. That's good. But instead of going back to the Lord, now they're going to each other looking for answers. They start working on it themselves. So often we'll seek God's face, but if he's not answering as quickly as we want him to answer, then we feel emboldened and entitled to go about doing things our own way. Stay in his face until you get his direction. His way is right. His direction is sure. His way is best. Don't do things your own way. Just wait until you know what God is saying. Again, they took that oath to kill anyone who didn't show, and that's understandable. It's like, look, we as a nation are going to purge this evil from our midst, and everyone needs to be involved in it. In Matthew chapter 5, verse 37, from the Amplified Version, it says, "But let your statement be yes, yes, or no, no." So, in other words, let your yes be yes or your no be no. Affirm yes, affirm no. Anything more than that comes from the evil one. So, it's really best that we do not make oaths and take oaths. In some situations and in some circumstances, that's needed. One oath that is taken that is honorable is the oath of the covenant of marriage. So whenever you're entering into any kind of covenantal relationship, and an oath does make covenant, you need to be very, very sober minded. You need to go into it with as much knowledge as possible. Shouldn't be something that's done flippantly, because the consequences of that oath, the gravity of it, weighs so heavily. All right, let's keep going. So they ask, "Who among the tribes of Israel did not join us at Mizpah when we assembled in the presence of the Lord?" And they discovered that no one from Jabesh Gilead had attended. Now, if that sounds familiar, it was said in verse 5. It was like, hey, who didn't go? So they're seeking each other again, but they're not necessarily seeking God again. "For after they counted all the people, no one from Jabesh Gilead was present. So the assembly sent 12,000 of their best warriors to Jabesh Gilead with orders to kill everyone there, including women and children. This is what you are to do," they said: "completely destroy all the males and every woman who is not a virgin." This completely destroyed statement is what's called dedication. This is what happened in Jericho when the children of Israel marched around the walls and the walls fell. The Lord called for them to dedicate that city to him. Dedication is a form of sacrifice. Instead of taking the spoils, taking the things that are there in killing everything, you're sacrificing it, you're giving it to God. And that is a very honorable thing. But if God's not asking for it, it's not something that you should do. We should only give what He is asking for us to give. We should only take the actions that He's instructing us to take. Because when we do things our own way, we can mess things up. Now, Jabesh Gilead was in Manasseh. That's known for its rugged terrain and its balm. If ever you've heard the song or heard the term that there's a balm in Gilead, this is the region where it was coming from. Gilead was considered anything on the eastern side of the Jordan, which is where Reuben, Gad, and half the tribe of Manasseh were. In their half, uh, this Jabesh Gilead region is where the men that were supposed to come did not come from. Now, one of Saul's first acts as king was that he freed them from Ammon. Ammon was uh, oppressing them, and he freed them, which caused the men of Jabesh Gilead, when Saul was killed by the Philistines and then put on the wall of their temple of Dagon, the men of Jabesh Gilead went to Philistia to retrieve his bones so that he could have a proper burial. Them doing this, being the Israelites, killing all of Jabesh Gilead, that was pretty dramatic, but it was right because they made a covenant. They promised God that anyone within Israel, because this was for Israel as a whole. So if it's for everyone, it includes the activity of everyone. And if they didn't come, they were being put to death, which that's so, I'll just say interesting, because I can't find a better word for that right now, but it's sobering. It's very sobering that sometimes covenants impact you that you don't know anything about, which is why it's important that you pray and ask the Lord to relieve you of, uh, we used to pray and say, Lord, keep me from danger seen and unseen. This could be an unseen danger, some covenant, some agreement that was made on your behalf, and rightfully so, without your knowledge. So it's important that you pray about those things. All right, let's pick back up with the scriptures. Among the residents of Jabesh Gilead, they found 400 young virgins who had never slept with a man, and they brought them to the camp at Shiloh in the land of Canaan. The Israelite assembly sent a peace delegation to the remaining people of Benjamin who were living at the rock of Rimmon. Quick pause. Shiloh means peace. So, from a place that means peace, they sent a peace delegation. I just thought that that was a interesting point. The name Shiloh, or I should say, the term of peace being Shiloh, it's comes from a prophetic context in Genesis chapter 49, verse 10, where it says, "The scepter will not depart from Judah, nor the staff from between his feet, until Shiloh comes, and the allegiance of the nations is his." Of course, this was speaking about Jesus being the one in Judah whom the scepter will not depart from. And again, that Shiloh there means peace. So from peace, they sent a delegation of peace. The men of Benjamin returned to their homes, and the 400 women of Jabesh Gilead who had been spared were given to them as wives. But there weren't enough women for all of them. Remember, there were about 600 men that were at the Rock of Rimmon. So 400 women, you got 200 men who do not have wives, 200 men who cannot carry on the legacy and the name of Benjamin. Again, which that's so interesting. I just thought about this. Again, Jabesh Gilead is a place where Saul did one of his first acts. He relieved them of their oppression by Ammon. Most likely, he did this because he was a distant descendant of the people of Jabesh Gilead, because Saul was of the tribe of Benjamin. That just came to my mind. That also makes sense as to why the men of Jabesh Gilead went and got him, because of that connection. The women here, the young women that it states, it says that they were young virgins. That word young is the same word used as damsel, which was a word that was used to describe the man's concubine, who was part of the start of all this. Virgin is the same word used for the man's house that the Levite stayed in. He offered his daughter and the concubine. The men weren't having it. They wanted the Levite, they wanted that man. And he then his threw his concubine to them, and they had their way with her for so long, and in such a manner that it brought about her death. Now you have women who hold the same titles, young women. These are probably like teenagers who now are being involved in all of this mess, this chain reaction. One act has brought about all these different things. Now, when it comes to a damsel, some examples from the Bible are like Miriam, when Moses was in the bulrushes, when he was first born. Ruth was considered a damsel. Rebecca, which that explains why Laban was so protective of her when Abraham's servant came looking for a wife. Abishag, who was the young lady who kept David's body warm, and when he didn't have sexual relations with her, they're like, "Oh yeah, he's definitely getting ready to get out. He got this little young thing on him, and he's doing nothing. Yeah, he's dead." Naaman's servant girl was also a damsel, and then the Shulamite woman and her peers in the Song of Solomon were considered damsels. So just to give some context as to who these people were. Now, we'll keep going in verse 15. The people felt sorely for Benjamin, because the Lord had made this gap among the tribes of Israel. So the Lord did this. He's the one who made the gap. Why did the gap have to be made? It had to be made because of the sin, the gross sin that took place within the people of Benjamin. That sin had to be atoned for. It had to be made right. And the only way to make that right was by the lives of the men who were killed. So the elders of the assembly asked, "How can we find wives for the few who remain, since the women of the tribe of Benjamin are dead? There must be heirs for survivors, so that an entire tribe of Israel is not wiped out. But we cannot give them our own daughters in marriage, because we have sworn with a solemn oath that anyone who does this will fall under God's curse." Again, Benjamin had to suffer the things that they had to suffer, but it didn't have to be this way. If the men of Benjamin gave up the men of Gibeah, like Israel asked, then they would be the only ones who suffered the consequence. But because they chose to stand with them is the reason that all but 600 of the men who went to fight, who went out to battle, died. It's so important for us to know, if we stand with sin, if we stand with those who do evil, if we're supporting them, then we open ourselves up to suffer whatever consequences are coming their way. The elders were seeking counsel, like, what do we do? We don't have enough women for these men. Now, granted, they may, being the people of Benjamin, may have decided to stand with them because We know that 700 elite soldiers were in Gibeah. They were left-handed. They were really deadly accurate with slingshots and things. And maybe they said we need to stand with them because they may turn on us. They were already trying to have their way with this strange man. They may turn on us, beat us, and take advantage of us as well. I don't know. But we know that they chose to stand with them. And because of their standing with them, their suffering, had they given them up, then they would be the only ones. Again, the elders are seeking counsel for this. Who says that the men wanted women, but it doesn't matter. They were still looking to make things right to keep the lineage going, but they didn't seek the Lord. They were seeking one another, which is the problem. Again, it's good to get counsel, but it's better to get godly counsel. All right, just a few more verses to go before before going into that. Just one last thing: whatever you say you need to do. That we used to say, or it was said back in the 80s a lot. Word is bond. Word is bond, and a man is only as good as his word. Whatever we say, we need to stand by it. And as we can see, the men of Israel were serious about standing by their word, which is why they would not give their daughters to the men of Benjamin. Otherwise, a curse would fall on them. Then they thought of the annual festival of the Lord held in Shiloh. Yes, the same Shiloh where the 400 women were taken to that camp, the same Shiloh where they led the peace mission to the Rock of Rimmon, that same Shiloh, south of Lebonah and north of Bethlehem. I mean, Bethel, not Bethlehem. Along the east side of the road that goes from Bethel to Shechem. They told the men of Benjamin who still needed wives, go and hide in the vineyards. When you see the young women of Shiloh come out for their dances, rush out from the vineyards, and each of you can take one of them home to the land of Benjamin to be your wife. And when their fathers and brothers come to us in protest, we will tell them, please be sympathetic. Let them have your daughters, for we didn't find wives for all of them when we destroyed Jabesh Gilead. And you are not guilty of breaking the vow, since you didn't actually give your daughters to them in marriage. Man. So, I mean, it's upsetting. It is mind blowing, the steps to which we will go when we're doing things our own way. I mean, it's just craziness. When man does things his own way, he perverts the plan of God. This was like the worst game of catch a girl, get a girl ever. Go kidnap your wife, hide and kidnap your wife, or I should say, kidnap somebody and make them your wife. Again, this was at Shiloh, which this was a place of worship. The tabernacle was located in Shiloh for some 300 years before there was a king, and the tabernacle and the ark were moved to different places. It sat there for a long time. And these young ladies are going to worship God. We recently had a production at church. Many young women who fell into the age range that this is speaking about were there. It's like them coming to church for that. And when they got out the car, somebody jumped out of a van, grabbed them, and took them off and said, okay, well, now you're going to be my wife. This, it's craziness, absolute madness. But this is what they came up with. And the loophole was, well, you didn't give your daughter. They took them, but let it be. It's again absolute madness. So you found a loophole instead of getting God's direction. It's so important that we see God's face. So the men of Benjamin did as they were told. Each man caught one of the women as she danced in the celebration and carried her off to be his wife. They returned unto their own land and rebuilt their towns and lived in them. Then the people of Israel departed by tribes and families, and they returned to their own homes. In those days, Israel had no king. All the people did whatever seemed right in their own eyes. Proverbs chapter 14, verse 22 tells us that there's a path before each person that seems right, but it ends in death. Those men of Gibeah, what they did, it seemed right to them. It's like, we can do it. No one can stop us from doing it, so we're doing it. But it led to not only their death, but the death of tens of thousands of people and almost the extinction of their tribe. We need a king to lead us, and that king is Jesus. Seek his face, do what he says, because his way is best. All right, key points from today's lesson: stay in God's face until you get his direction. Don't do things your own way. Don't use your own plans unless your plans have been given to you by God. Unless he's gifted you to create that plan, don't follow your own way. Be careful with covenants. They are lasting and they are important. Don't enter into them lightly. Go into them sober-minded and with much thought. We suffer the consequences of evildoers when we stand with them. So be careful of who you align yourself with. As some people say, you're only, or I should say, your ceiling is capped by those that you associate with. You know, look at your 5 friends. Where are they going? What are they doing? That's most likely what you'll be doing. When man does things his own way, he perverts God's plan. Know that God's way is best. It may not feel good, it may not look good, it may not seem good, but it's always what's best. All right, that brings us to a conclusion for this lesson and this book. Until next time, God bless and keep it together.